Hey, in this video I'll be reviewing and discussing Going Postal by Terry Pratchett. So this is the first of the Moist von Lipwig novels, who is the main character of the trilogy. And as a quick spoiler for review, this is a fantastic book. I definitely put in like the top 2 or 3 of all the Discworld books. I really, really love it. I love the characters, I love the plot, I love the setting, I love the vibe, I love everything. Fantastic book, 9 out of 10, amazing. Alright, so now we've got the spoiler-free review done. Let's just jump into some of the... So let's just start with characters. The characters in this book are fantastic. So we have our main character, Moist von Lipwig, Moist, who's this sort of like confidence trickster guy who's like been forced to go straight by another one of our characters we'll get to, Lord Veterinari. And this is just... He makes it for a really interesting conundrum of a character because he's always... The reason he's a trickster is not necessarily because he's a bad person, although you could argue that it makes him a bad person, but rather it's just because he wants to, the thrill of a game, he wants to achieve stuff and, be able to keep score of money and stuff. It's just a really interesting idea, and I think that this character is really, really cool, and it's interesting seeing his talents put to use for legitimate stuff, and seeing how those people skills which he's used for nefarious purposes can be put to good. So it's really interesting, just seeing this character grow and develop throughout the story. Because at first, at the start, he's like, I'm just gonna get out of here. But he becomes more and more committed to this thing because he stops viewing confidence trickstering and scamming people as his profession and his way of keeping score. He starts viewing with post office, which is what he's doing in this book, as his way of keeping score instead. So he makes a really interesting character. Then we have our supporting cast of Grote and Stanley, the 2 people who are at the post office to begin with. These are just quite fun. They're not very deep characters, but they're quite fun. Stanley is just, I really like this weird thing. I don't really understand what Pratchett was going for here, but I kind of had a giggle where like, Stanley was super into collecting pins, and then he started collecting stamps. And I think that maybe is just a subtle dig at people who collect stamps and just like how silly it is. Although, I don't think Terry Pratchett I don't think he's like saying it's a terrible idea. I think he's just, he's just having a bit of fun there. So that's fun. Stanley is an interesting character. Then we have Grote, who's also, he's a little bit of a deeper character. He's a little bit interesting, and you can see how he's very much a product of his, like, where he's been for a while, and he just makes for quite an interesting sort of individual, So the 2 supporting characters, whilst not super deep, sort of make the post office a bit more fun and interesting. And then we've got our villain, Mr. Guilt, Richard Guilt, who makes for a really interesting villain because he is, he sort of serves as a foil for our main character because he is what our main character is, right, or used to be. But he doesn't have any of the redeeming qualities. So I guess what this book's trying to say is that you can be a bad person and have these redeeming qualities, and therefore, when you're offered redemption, you can take it, right? But if you're a bad person and you have no redeeming qualities, then when you're offered redemption, you won't take it, which is, in fact, how this book ends. But, so having Richie Guild as this foil, because he is basically what Moist von Lipwig is as well, but on a bigger scale and worse, right? And Moist von Lipwig has to sort of work to take him down over the course of the story. So he makes for a really interesting villain. He's also cool, his personality's fun. And I was listening to the audiobook, and I really liked the narrator's, voice for Guilt, Richie Guilt. And then, probably one of my favourite characters of all time, top 5 characters just of any book ever, Lord Veterinari, making another great show here. Fun, interesting character. I love the way he like manipulates the politics of a city. In fact, I'm going to make a video about the politics of this book specifically, but I just thought Veterinari is just he's really subtle, really understated, really an interesting character, and very complex and nuanced, but he actually, in terms of lines of dialogue, I don't think he's got very many at all, but they're also like well put together, well crafted by Pratchett. So just really great on the characters. Then if we move into plot, the plot of this book is sort of twofold, and they're both relatively simple when they sort of intertwine. Where one is that Moist needs to rejig the post office and make the post office great again, if you will, if you excuse the metaphor, excuse the turn of phrase. And then his other job is to sort of defeat his sort of nemesis, Mr. Richie Guilt. And he's sort of intertwined because obviously the post office and Guilt's company are in contention with each other. But these 2 plots work really well because throughout the entire story, you've got this plot of the post office just becoming better again, and that's just a really enjoyable. I really like these sort of like redemption arc sort of stories, or redemption of an idea or a system or anything. And it's just this entire time you're like, oh cool, the post office is starting to work again. Oh my gosh, he's doing this, and he's thinking, and he's going to do them like this when like you first hear a mention of stamps, what's going to happen. But just sort of fun going along for a ride, so that's enjoyable. And then, like I said, Guilt makes for a compelling, interesting villain. So seeing him being taken down by Moist as well in its own plot, which ties in with the post office plot, just makes for a really interesting, compelling plot, which you can kind of see developing over the course of the story, though you don't necessarily know where it's going to go. So the plot is good. I like the resolution of it at the end with Veterinari dealing with Guilt. So the plot's interesting. The setting, Ankh-Morpork, I might make a video specifically on just how cool the setting Ankh-Morpork is sometime, but it's just amazing. It's a really cool city, and specifically the setting of a post office is really interesting. This like sort of old defunct building that needs to be sort of re-energized and redone. But then, so that's like, you know, that you might find in a normal novel without fantasy. And then Terry Pratchett throws in some interesting fantasy elements about like how like words and stuff, which this is something he goes back to, words have their own sort of magic. And these sort of just add to the fantasy ideas and give it a bit of a twist, a bit of extra spice. So the setting is really cool, but the post office and then Ankh-Morpork book is it's just dripping with personality. There's so much stuff going on. It's sort of, I reckon that Terry Pratchett, he obviously took inspiration from lots of cities. I think London being a big one, but I also think he's got a little bit of New York inspiration there, where he's talking about how things are open at all times of night because people might want like random shit in the middle of the night. And I was like, yeah, that's sort of a New Yorky vibe, isn't it? So just the city just really pops off the page, and you can just imagine being there. So the setting is good, the characters are good, the plot is good. And then I guess like maybe a fourth category, I guess I could just term ambiance, like just the way the way the story feels, the way that like it all just feels really sort of real and invigorating, and like it really sucks you in and makes you invest in what's happening. And so I would say that all of these things sort of tie together by that feel, and it's definitely there. So this book really gripped me from the very start. I enjoyed, and if I might just pick out a few scenes specifically that I enjoyed. One more character just to get to really quickly. You can tell I don't really organize very much, but one more character to get to really quickly is Miss Dearheart, who I think is just a really sort of interesting character, and an interesting foil for Moist because he's sort of used to figuring people out. But like he can't really figure her out. I think it's basically a more subtle and well done version of, you know how in Twilight, Edward can't read Bella's thoughts for just reasons. I think it's sort of a more subtle, well done version of that, where like he's used to like swindling and manipulating people, but when he can't manipulate someone, he actually finds them interesting and compelling. So yeah, there's that. So she's a cool character, and then just some scenes that I really liked. I like the scene where he goes and gets a cat out of a burning building. It's just kind of an interesting, because this is a very typical tactic used by authors and screenwriters and stuff, where they want someone to seem likable, so they make them get a cat out of a build. You save a cat from something, like maybe you've seen Alita Battle Angel, and like a cat's about to be, is it a cat or a dog? Some small animal's about to be crushed, and she saves it, right? So this, and I think Terry Pratchett is having a bit of fun here with this sort of trope, because we see his internal thoughts, and he's like, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I going to save a cat? You know what I mean? And so we get this, like, sort of internal dialogue versus this external, like, yeah, I'm a hero, I'm saving a cat. And he's like, what am I doing? So that was quite interesting. The Clacks is a really cool idea, and it's really well executed here as, like, the sort of opposition to the post office, the fast, and if like, the fast system that's not maintained properly versus, like, this, behemoth that's sort of powering up, if you will, in the form of a post office. Really interesting. So yeah, I really enjoyed, like I said, so just to quickly summarize, it's got a good plot, good characters, good ambiance, and an amazing setting, and these things all sort of come together to give you just a really nice, like, enjoyable package of a book, which will really tug you in, and you'll just be enjoying it the whole way through. And the other thing as well is it's quite short. It's not a super duper long book, like a lot of the Discworld books are short, so you can really sort of chug through it in an afternoon if you want to, and you probably will want to. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.